Hello and welcome to the Reactive Dog Pod. I am your host, Tess Morgan. I am a multi-certified dog behavior consultant who specializes in the treatment of reactivity in dogs. Through my business, Treat Yourself Dog Training and Behavior, I help clients make progress and enjoy life again with their reactive dogs. Join me and my guests as we dive into all things reactivity. We'll explore behavior concepts, talk about real-life training plans and considerations for reactive dogs, provide tips and tricks, and discuss how we can best help reactive dogs and their families thrive. Because reactive dogs are good dogs, they just need a little bit of extra support. Let's get into it. For most people, when they think about hiring a trainer to help with their reactive dog, private one-on-one training is what comes to mind. But there are good reasons why you might want to consider working with your reactive dog in a group training context. Today, I'll be talking to my guest about group options for reactive dogs, which ones to try, when your dog might be ready for group training, and what to avoid. My guest today is Sandy Wei. Sandy is a certified dog behavior consultant and trainer at Wei with Tails, with a special interest in reactivity. Her education and qualifications include a diploma with Companion Animal Sciences Institute. She's a family dog mediator, certified professional dog trainer, knowledge assessed, an aggression in dogs master course graduate, and she's BC SPCA Animal Kind accredited. She resides in Penticton, BC with her dog Shukra. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you, Tess. Thank you.
So Sandy, I've been asking all of my guests before we get started talking about our topic today to tell me a little bit about the dogs in your life and if you've ever worked with a reactive dog personally in your own family.
Yeah, so my very first dog was when I was in I think I was in grade 4 or 5 when we acquired this Maltese Shih Tzu mix, and he was so reactive. Looking back, I now know that he was reactive, but I just didn't know how to deal because I was just a kid. So that was my first true experience with a reactive dog, a dog that had really big feelings around humans and dogs. And then my second was my second dog, my first dog as an adult, and his name is Kiko, a pit bull, and he was severely reactive and had aggression behaviors towards other animals. Really great with people, but had incredibly big feelings to other animals, and the threshold distance was like any distance. So that, and to this date, he is my most severe case. He's no longer with us. And then now we have Shukra, who is a possibly King Corso or Pity mixed with Blab. And she also has some big feelings. So I like to say reactivity is big feelings, because sometimes I find that when we say a dog is reactive or experiences reactivity, most people will automatically assume the dog is mean. But then if I say my dog has big feelings, then it also encompasses if the dog is excited, fearful, or wants to kick another dog's ass. So my current dog, Shukra, her big feelings are centered around mostly fear. So with my pit bull, his reactivity came out in fight. My current dog, Shukra, her reactivity and big feelings comes out in flight. So she bolts. She wants to escape. So it's very different, but I would still categorize that as reactivity. So yeah, I've had a whole range of reactive cases in my own personal life.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think the flight thing is interesting, right? Because if she was not with you and someone else had adopted her and was not allowing her to escape the things that she was scared of, it very well could turn into fight.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of on the same pendulum.
Right. Yeah.
And the other thing I find interesting since I've been doing this podcast is there's been a lot of conversation about the word reactivity, and I've thought about that a lot myself, is like, is it helpful? Because I think in some ways it is helpful just to find community with other people and to kind of like talk about things that can be helpful for dogs in this category, but
Yeah.
certainly there's like a downside to labeling
Yeah.
a dog reactive, like you said.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so today we're talking about group training for reactive dogs, which I think is a bit different than what most people envision when they think about hiring a trainer to help them with their dog.
Yes.
But there's a lot of different kind of types of group offerings when it comes to reactivity. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, when might you consider group training for your reactive dog, either instead of one-on-one training or kind of like in addition to working one-on-one with the trainer?
Yeah, so usually in a perfect flow of a training journey, I would recommend that a client with a dog that experiences big feelings and reactivity to work with a trainer one-on-one privately to understand the techniques and management required to help the dog make better choices and feel safe and confident, and really train the guardian, coach the guardian on what to do in certain scenarios. I recommend a few private sessions to really assess if the guardian or client is ready to put into real life practice in a controlled setting. So after I'm able to assess that my client might be ready and they have a really good knowledge of, okay, my dog needs this much distance from this kind of distraction or trigger and this much distance from this kind of trigger and distraction. Because, our dogs have different threshold distances for different triggers and distractions. So we have to make sure that our client knows. And, if it's really easy to walk through the theory during a consultation and giving them I give my clients a bit of a quiz on, and in this kind of scenario, what would you do? And if they pass, that's great. But I need time to pass for them to come back to me and tell me, okay, so I've nailed it. We're doing great. Or maybe they come back and say, we're not nailing it and we could use some help, more help. So depending on how they're tracking on their training journey and our touch bases, I then might add them to my parallel walk
Mhm.
wait list. And I know to personally reach out to them and invite them to my parallel walk group classes because I feel like they are ready. And I also trust that they know what they're doing and that they're confident in their handling skills. So that's when I would invite people to take those reactivity based group classes with me.
And when do you like, why would someone even do group training at all? Like, what is the benefit to doing group training with a reactive
Yeah.
dog?
So the benefit would be they know that they have me as a safety net, supervising, watching, having a very um, having very structured activities and program for us to work through together. So usually my parallel walk group classes are 3 sessions once a week. And I start very base level so I can read where everyone is at. And even if everyone is at a different level, I still am able to orchestrate the training so that everyone can work at their skill level. But I think the benefit is that the clients have me um, as a resource to step in if I have to, because if they get lost, if they get overwhelmed, I can guide them. And so
Mm,
they have that extra support. And then they can see maybe what other clients are doing and how they're handling things. But most of the time, I would say the biggest benefit is safety.
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
it's really important because I don't want them to be practicing with random dogs that they're passing by. Because what if that dog is reactive? That's not really fair. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Or off leash.
Yeah, or off leash.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So yeah, it's just, and one of my selling points in inviting my clients to these parallel group classes, hey, like other clients have also done this training. So we all trust that we know what we're doing with our dogs, like in this together. So you're totally in a safe place.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is that I guess if the dog does become overwhelmed, you can kind of give them permission to say, you know
Yes.
what, this isn't continuing isn't going to be helpful. Let's just wrap it up and give
Yeah.
your dog a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the benefits too for like, I wish I had had something like that when I was working with my dog because
Mm.
um, it's hard for people when you say, okay, go out and like find a dog to practice with. Either there's no dogs that they know that they can practice with, or all of their friend and family dogs are maybe not very well trained, or don't have, like, aren't able to disengage from another dog, or will bark at their dog, right? And so there's, even if they can find a helper dog or someone who's willing to bring their dog to help, it might not be a suitable dog for their
Yeah.
dog to work with. So
Yeah.
having other dogs where the trainer has like handpicked them to be in
Yeah.
can be really helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes looking at who is invited or who has registered, like if who has registered are all quite advanced in their training, I might hold off the last spot and invite someone that's not as advanced so that they can benefit from other advanced clients.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that, like,
Mhm.
role models. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. But I think there is definitely a benefit to, okay, we've worked this far, we've worked, come this far in our training plan. Now we actually do want to practice with other dogs, like,
Yeah.
especially with, I have a helper dog, but like if the dog has gotten to a point where they can be relatively close to my dog, or even they've met my dog, okay, what's the next step? We need more dogs now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think one of the things that might attract people to group training, aside from having those dogs to work with, assuming that your dog is reactive to other dogs, right? Your dog might be reactive to strangers or bikes or
Yeah.
something
Yeah. Yeah.
else. But I think accessibility is one of the things that might attract people, in terms of, like, it's usually cheaper to go to a group training class than to
Yeah.
do one-on-one. So it might be more accessible for people as
Yeah.
well.
But then I would still emphasize that they get private training done first. Otherwise, they're going to kind of hold the group back if they're learning all the things for the first time in a group setting.
True. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I want to talk about reactive dog classes, but let's talk about that in our next kind of conversation.
Right.
Um, so I was going to ask you where a dog should be in their training progress, but you kind of answered that. And I think the answer is it depends on the dog and the client. And there's no, like, you need to be able to be within 10 feet of another dog. Like, there's no specific set standard,
No.
more just like, hey, I feel like you're ready based on watching you.
Yeah, I think if I were really to narrow it down, the criteria I would really be asking is also, does your dog successfully disengage when you mark a stimulus?
Hmm.
Does your dog respond successfully to that yes marker word or the clicker? And has the threshold distance improved over time? So
Mm-hmm.
if they tell me that those things have progressed, and I might even ask them, what is the success rate of your dog responding to your marker word when you guys see a stimulus? And if they tell me 8 out of 10, I'm like, that's pretty good. Let's put you in a good class. Let's see how we can advance you guys. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and just to clarify for anyone who doesn't understand, when we say responding to a marker word, we're talking about, we do a lot of training where the dog notices the other dog or the bike or whatever the thing is, and we use a marker word like yes or good, or we use a clicker to mark the moment that they look. And usually what we're looking for is for the dog to check back in with us after they hear the click or the yes, or sometimes we're even just looking for the dog to just look away from the thing when they hear
Right.
the yes or the click.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about group training. Do you want to talk a little bit about, so you've talked about your parallel walks and the criteria for kind of signing clients up for them. What does your parallel walk look like? Like, what would people expect if they were to sign up for a parallel walk like yours?
Okay, so I first started parallel walks a few years ago under Renee at Bravo Dog Training. So I facilitated all the parallel walks there, and I kind of, to be honest, I wasn't given like a very I wasn't given any kind of agenda. Like I was given a lot of freedom to be creative, and thank God for that, because I was really winging it based on the client dogs in front of me. We got lucky because in North Vancouver, there's this park that is very long, It's very long, and how it's designed is the walkway is right in the middle, and on both sides is a lot of grass. So if we ever needed to pull the dogs over, we could easily do that in both directions. So that was honestly like the perfect environment to do a parallel walk. I have yet to find a similar environment where I live. So now, working for myself now, we meet up at a middle school soccer field, and it's not, it's a square. So we have to imagine the parallel lines, but I usually start the first class of three, having the 4 or 5 dogs walk in a single file. So it's not, we call it a parallel walk, but we really barely do any true parallel work. We start with a single file, and then I go over very clear distinction that we're going to be shifting gears between counter conditioning, which is helping our dogs make better choices when they see a stimulus, disengaging from them and choosing us. And we're also at the same time simultaneously doing loose leash walking. And usually when I have worked with my clients privately, almost every case, we cover both items. We cover both counter conditioning, the dogs having big feelings about certain triggers or distractions, and we also cover loose leash walking. But then now they have to do both simultaneously in real life. And so I need to watch them to see if they can even handle that. So we start single file, and I just tell them, let your dog sniff, get the sniffs out of the way. I'm just going to watch you and help refine your handling skills. And I'll coach and jump from client to client. And then I might introduce everyone to each other, and I might ask each client to share what their dog's biggest trigger is, and where they're at their training journey. And then when things are going good after the single file walk, we might do what's called the figure 8. I totally made this up, but it is 2 dogs stationary with their humans, and then the other 2 dogs or the other 3 dogs walk figure 8 around the 2 stationary dogs, and then they take turns being stationary. So just because you're stationary doesn't mean that you're not doing the training. So even if you're in the same spot, you still have to counter condition it if your dog is looking at another dog, or you can practice managing your dog and doing treat scatters, magnet hands. And if anybody at any time needs to help their dog gain distance, you can let's go at any point. So sorry, when I say let's go, I mean help your dog build distance to, because if they go over threshold and they can't respond to your training, then that means they need more space and maybe a bit of a break. So I tell everyone, like, don't wait for me to cue you. You just do what your dog needs in the moment. And I'll never give you any criticism for advocating for your dog. And so we do figure 8s, and then we might work towards what's called a hallway exercise. And the hallway exercise is I might have all the clients line up in 2 lines, and then everybody takes turn walking their dog down the hallway with dogs on either side. But it is very, like, the hallway lines are very far away. And I always say, choose a spot where your dog can succeed. And so maybe some dogs are closer to the dog walking past them, and some dogs are further. So we do a hallway exercise. If there is a bike rack or a ledge, we then practice walking around it as a group, single file. And now we practice walking with a safe physical barrier between all the dogs. And then I might, if things are going well, we might end the first session with pretending we bump into our neighbor, small chatting, and then let's go. So we know that when dogs directly approach each other, they might have bigger feelings. So we practice walking towards each other because sometimes we can't get away from someone.
Yeah.
So we have to practice walking towards each other. I make it very safe. So then I tell my clients to place an object, a water bottle, a backpack, put it in the spot where you want the other person to stop. So they get to decide the distance that their dog needs.
Mhm.
And so they approach the two marked spots with the objects, and then they chat for a bit, and then we do an immediate let's go.
Mm.
And I'm just on the side counting 1, 2, 3. So the instructions are, you guys are going to walk towards each other. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. And then you guys are going to do immediate U-turns with let's go. So we
Mhm.
practice that. That's the first week. And then the second week, I really challenged all the clients to now be more intentional with their handling skills. So I'm a bit more of a hard ass, and I'm like, I don't want to see anyone holding treats or bribing their dogs. I really want to see you hiding the treats behind your back or keeping it in your pouch, because I do not want your dogs to be looking at you for the wrong reasons. Then we're not really training. And then we might practice applying the 1, 2, 3 pattern game
Mhm.
by controlled unleashed.
Mhm.
And then we talk about when to use 1, 2, 3 versus the counter conditioning, when it would be more beneficial to use 1, 2, 3. Um, and then I might, I don't know, put a big bag of treats somewhere or put my backpack down that's full of treat smells. And then they practice 1, 2, 3 or other engagement cues passing. And
Mhm.
we're not using the counter conditioning yes anymore. So I really want to make sure that my clients know when to use what tool, and that they have an assortment of tools in their toolbox, but to use it strategically. Yes.
This all sounds really great, and what it sounds like to me is it's a reactive dog class.
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
but
yeah.
like like we imagine a parallel walk to be just like literally just walking parallel to each other,
Yeah.
and maybe the type of thing that we might recommend as trainers for like, hey, I need to introduce my dog to a new dog. How do I do that? And then we are more literally kind of walking parallel and getting closer slowly.
Mhm.
But with this, it sounds like a reactive dog class. Although a lot of the reactive dog classes, and I wanted to kind of talk about this because there's a lot of different types of group training for reactive
Mm,
dogs. And typically when I think of reactive dog class, I think of classes where it's indoors, there's visual barriers. So there might be like an X pen with a sheet over it or something to kind of block the dog off. And then maybe dogs pop out quickly and then go behind their visual barrier. It's kind of orchestrated that way. And it sounds like you just have an outdoor version of that, but without the visual barriers because you have the space that you do.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I could ever do an indoor reactive dog class. It feels very confined, and I don't think it really replicates real life situations.
Yeah.
Um,
Think, there are trainers that do it a lot and all the power to them if they're having success.
yeah,
I think it feels, as someone who has a reactive dog and works with a lot of people with reactive dog, the outdoor version of it feels more like, okay, maybe I could try that, because if it's
yeah,
too much for my dog, I can just leave. Can just
yeah,
walk, get distance or go around the corner outside or whatever.
right.
Um, so it's interesting. It's kind of like it feels like a more accessible version of that like reactive dog class
Yeah.
concept.
Sometimes people will email and inquire, and they will say, I have a dog who's reactive. When's your next obedience class so I can sign my dog up so that they can get used to being around other dogs? I'm like, whoa, hold your horses.
Hmm.
That is not the step you want to take. We have to address this privately first. I'm not trying to get more money from you. It's just that in an indoor class is not beneficial for your dog and what you're trying to address. And then I have to explain, like, in these group classes, we're talking about like, sit, stay, go to bed. And that's not what you need help with. You need to address your dog's big feelings and help them change their associations. It's a totally different kind of training. And I have to explain it. And some people don't like my answer, and that's okay. It's just not my
Yeah.
client then.
Yeah, yeah. But you do teach loose leash walking as part of your reactivity
Mhm.
program, which a
Yeah.
lot of people would associate as an obedience exercise,
Yeah.
right? So do you want to talk a
That's
bit about why that is included and why you feel like that's an important part of the reactivity training?
Man, sometimes when I help my clients address their dog's reactivity through the counter conditioning training, helping them disengage and make good choices. Sometimes they overuse the yes, for example, when their dog is pulling. And they're
Mm,
like, yes. I'm like, "Oh, I don't see a trigger. What are you yesing to?"
yeah,
They were
yeah,
like, oh, but I know that when I say yes, the dog is going to look at me and not
yeah,
pull.
yeah. I've
I'm
seen
like,
that too.
yeah, but then you're technically yesing the pulling
Mm,
because you're cueing the wrong behavior. So instead, we have to ask them to engage with an engagement cue with like a mouth noise or what's
mm,
this, not popping the leash, but reminding to check in if you
mhm,
want them to walk on a looser leash. So I really don't want my dog, sorry, I really don't want my clients to get confused between the two. And so I do build in the loose leash walking into the parallel walks. And then I have some clients who really just want to do more advanced training with their dogs. And I know, and they know their dogs are actually not reactive, but they're like, well, why not? I'll just join her class and we might learn a few things. And I'm like, cool, you focus on loose leash walking, whereas
mhm,
the other clients will do more reactivity. And then
mhm.
we just juggle all of it. Um, yeah, I really enjoy, I think those two items are my favorite things to work on with clients.
There's a couple benefits I think specifically for like for me, I'm on the bandwagon of I don't love the idea of like obedience for reactivity.
Yeah.
But I think that like obedience, I say with quotations,
Yeah.
exercises do benefit reactivity sometimes. I think of like weight, right? Weight is a great one. So your dog's not
Mhm.
going around corners, stuff like that. But with loose
Yes.
leash walking, it can really benefit reactivity for a couple reasons in my mind. The first one is if you're pulling the entire time you're on a walk, what is your state of mind if you're like constantly in that like pull mode, right? I don't think that's beneficial to like staying relaxed and engaging and being like your best self.
Yeah.
And then I also think about the logistics of like if your dog is way ahead of you the whole time, and obviously neither of us are like your dog must heel beside you,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if your dog is way ahead of you all the time in a place that there are triggers, it's much more likely that they're going to see the trigger before you and bump into them around a
Yeah.
corner or whatever. So I
Yeah.
think it has benefits there too.
Totally. Yeah. It's good too. It doesn't hurt to just encourage your dog to check in. It's good.
Mhm.
It's just good.
Yeah, and it benefits the reactivity because that's a lot of the reactivity training. We want to see those check-ins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me see. Oh, the only other thing about your class that I thought was interesting is the figure eight exercise because I think for a lot of dogs, like when I work with a reactive dog, I'm always mindful of like, okay, are you moving or are you still? Because a lot of the time being still or stationary is going to be harder for a dog
So
than
hard.
moving. So I think it's
Yeah.
cool that the dogs get to practice being in both of those
Yeah. And
situations.
then I really encourage my dog like, hey, if counter conditioning is too hard for you, I don't care if you have to treat scatter the whole time. I don't care
Mhm.
if you have the magnet hand. I don't care if you have to let's go, but then we might have to assess that your dog might need more space.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have dogs and clients that can't really participate in the exercises, but I still give them an exercise just for them on the far side. So they still have something to do that they can work on.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add that if the group is doing well as a whole, I will then ask the group, hey, next week, is it okay if I invite my partner to join? And then we can have him roll by on a skateboard. I
Mm-hmm.
might ask him to kick a soccer ball, make some dramatic noises. I might have him pop an umbrella. I might have him approach you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the best because he is a true stranger
Yeah.
joining the environment in the last like maybe 15 minutes. And he will, we've done us all sorts of things, but it's really hard for dogs that have big feelings to see a male stranger approach directly,
Mm-hmm.
pop an umbrella open.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then you see the dogs make good choices and
Yeah.
see the clients help the dogs make good choices. And that is really rewarding to me. And then they see, holy shit, my dog can do it.
Yeah.
And it gives them confidence to enter the real world with these training techniques.
And there's the control of like, okay, if your dog's losing their mind and this is like way too hard, that you can just stop him from doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or then I also ask each client to put an object where you want my husband to stop, and he will stop there and do the interaction. And it's never more than 3 seconds.
Yeah.
We might also, um, if the group is super, super advanced, and sometimes they are, or sometimes individual clients in the group are very advanced, I might, and I see that their dog is able to look at a trigger and relax and observe in a calm way, I might be like, you know what? I think your dog is ready to not be nagged constantly, to disengage. I think it's safe for your dog to just observe safely. But let's just double check that your dog is in a good place by asking him to touch, engage, instead of saying yes all the time. And that is something that I implemented through the substitution.
Predation substitution.
Predation. Yes. Simone. So that is like, I would categorize that as super advanced counter conditioning training, where we trust that our dogs can make good choices. They're voluntarily disengaging. Now we're ready for the dog to just observe safely, but then check in once in a while if they can respond to our very simple cues like touch, sit, and then they can go ahead and just look.
I just call that like my threshold test.
Okay, yeah. That's really
Like, you know, if we at the start of training, we do it and
Yeah.
then we take a break, and then after the break, we do it again just to make sure that you
Yes.
find, I don't know if you find this in your classes, but sometimes I find that like the dog is okay at the beginning, but just like there's a certain amount of exposure they can tolerate. Like, no
Yeah,
more.
no more. And sometimes it's the opposite. Every dog is
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
And then as the dogs are all doing well, we cinch in the shape. So we go a little
Mm.
closer, and then now we're just doing a stationary hang.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like replicating what it would be like to be at a patio around other dogs. And then if it's too much, it's a let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's like the last class if everyone is doing well. And then to really wrap up the group class, we'll do a butt sniff, because these poor dogs that have big feelings have probably never sniffed a dog's butt. And so I will, if the clients feel safe, I'll propose it, and whoever is down with it can participate. But basically, one dog in front gets magnet handed. We keep giving the dog treats while the second dog behind gets to sniff for 3 seconds, and then we let's go to separate them quickly. But it's really cool to see clients like, oh my God, my dog sniffed a butt for the first time.
Yeah. And
But
I guess you're, I know that you're careful about this, but I want to emphasize to people, it is a tricky thing, right? Because
yes.
some dogs will be into the food enough to stay there, even if they're not comfortable.
Yep, that's
So we
right.
want to make sure that we're, you know, not putting a dog in a situation they can't handle and trying
Yes.
to magnet hand them through it.
Yeah. And then some dogs don't like being sniffed the butt, so they definitely cannot participate. And some dogs are not comfortable being sniffed in the butt, but really want to sniff another dog's butt. So it's really, you have to ask everyone for their consent and how their dog may feel.
So we talked about your parallel walk / reactive dog classes, and we talked about reactive dog classes in like an indoor setting, and kind of like a more, I guess, like typical dog class setting. There's other group training opportunities that people might see pop up. Sometimes people have, like there's almost without a trainer going and kind of like, let's have a meetup and let's all walk our dogs together. Obviously that's a bit riskier because you don't have someone there to help you and to kind of prompt you to take a break or to get distance or whatever. And then what I wanted to talk about next is something that a lot of us, kind of like positive or force-free trainers usually educate about, maybe that isn't so beneficial. And that's the idea of these like pack walks. And so that typically is going to be a bunch of dogs who may or may not be reactive, walking very close together, usually on short leashes, usually like just like no room between them at all. Often we see aversive tools being used, so e-collars, prong collars, choke collars. Depending on the group, sometimes they're being corrected for looking at other dogs or reacting. And it's something that, you know, we don't typically recommend for clients. One of the reasons from my perspective, aside from the fact that like we're not putting these dogs in a situation they can handle, is that we really like I find it so beneficial to have that freedom of movement. And that's why a lot of the time we work on reactivity on long lines, or we make sure that dogs have agency to go sniff something if they want to, or to leave. And in these situations, there's not really that choice. So do you want to talk a little bit about this type of like pack walk group training and some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean the only kind of person that's really offering that I would say are dog walkers at the moment that I can think of. I can't think of any trainers that do that. But yeah, dog walkers are definitely doing that, and it's so unsafe. We see so many pictures and they're publicized as if it's impressive
Mm-hmm.
to the general public, and I think you and I are cringing when we see photos like that. It's like, wow, look at this one person that can handle so many dogs at once. But like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, but look at the body language of the dogs. They
Mm-hmm.
are trapped.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not beneficial. It is overexposure. It is flooding. I think guardians definitely have good intentions. You know, they're thinking, I just want to socialize my dog.
Mm-hmm.
So let's put them in this situation where they have to just deal with it. And the analogy I always give is if I'm scared of clowns and you want to help me get over clowns, you don't put me in a room full of clowns.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the worst case scenario. That would be making me more fearful of clowns. And
Mm-hmm.
every time I bring that up, that example, people get it. They're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
uh, but yeah, it's really not okay to put our dogs in that kind of situation. And they don't know the other dogs. That's even scarier.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of my notes about it too is like there is a safety issue because if a dog is extremely uncomfortable, that dog might bite the dog next to them, right? They might have a big reaction that causes, especially in a large group of dogs, for one dog to have a big reaction that could cause a huge chain reaction that
Yeah, that's
creates a really big
true.
safety concern. We know that one of the reasons we don't recommend prong collars, e-collars, all that kind of stuff for reactivity, really for anything, but for reactivity specifically, is because we're just suppressing the
Yeah,
feelings that they're having versus actually addressing that underlying cause. And if we're suppressing a bunch of dogs at once, who's to say that when one of them is going to say this is enough, and now they're in the middle of a big group of dogs?
right. And the clients and people looking might be impressed because the dogs are just walking, but what they're
Mhm.
not seeing is the dogs are possibly shut down.
Mhm.
And sure, the dog may not be exhibiting reactive behaviors, but you have a dog that is not having a quality time. And so who is that really benefiting?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot we could say about it, but I think I wanted to address it because it is one of the types of group training that people might see. I know in my
Right.
community, there's like in the Facebook group for dog owners in our community, there's
Okay.
people that will post and say like, hey, we're gonna meet up and do like a group training session or a group walk.
Wow.
And yeah, we said, okay, maybe it's better to not to have a trainer there, but also if you have a trainer who is not mindful of body language,
Right.
or if you don't have a trainer there, either way, it's really risky when it comes to what you're trying to get out of it. Because if what you're trying to get out of it is, hey, my dog practices engaging with me around other dogs and practices not reacting around other dogs, you could come out of it with your dog feeling even worse about other dogs, and then
Yeah.
you created a bigger problem for yourself
Yeah.
and your dog.
Man, I'm so happy that we don't have that in Penticton. I would
Yeah.
be so uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, it's not ideal. Um, I think you mentioned socialization, and I think that's a good way to transition into our next topic because I wanted to talk about the word socialization.
Yeah.
Um, it's often thrown around as kind of like a remedy for reactive dogs. Um, and that people should just socialize their dogs with other dogs to kind of cure their reactivity or resolve their reactivity. Um, so I wanted to talk about the idea of socialization because we use it a lot for puppies, and then we have kind of another category, which is remedial socialization. So giving your dog kind of positive experiences with other dogs as an adult, especially if they're dealing with reactivity. Um, do you think socializing your dog with other dogs, if they're reactive, could that do more harm than good?
I first want to address that we need to come up with a better term
Mm-hmm.
because when we say socialization, I think the general public is not understanding it the same way we might. Because when I think socialization with among dogs, I'm thinking safe desensitization and safe exposure, and also helping them build positive associations. But people are not thinking of those ideas when they think socialization. That word usually entails just the dog physically being around other dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I really wish the industry could all agree on a new term so
Mm-hmm.
it's not misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
Because now people are just throwing their dogs into dog parks, hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Or like, um, oh, my dog's a puppy. I really want my dog to be told off. So it's okay if your dog.
Ah.
I'm like, this is really not the space. You shouldn't be relying on other dogs to teach your dog.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's very damaging, and we need to come up with a new term.
Well, and when we think about puppy socialization, that's misunderstood as well, right? That's
Yeah.
people kind of understand that in the same way, where it's like, okay, I throw my puppy into a puppy class, even if it's not well run, I'm still socializing them or I'm bringing them to a dog park, like you said. And I think for both puppies and for dogs who have big feelings about other dogs, there's definitely a way to do it that can be beneficial, meaning your dog feels safe. Maybe we're using treats to create a really positive association, and your dog comes out of it feeling like other dogs are a good thing or not as bad as they thought they were.
Mhm.
But we have to be careful about that, right? And so I think like, is socialization helpful for your dog? It can be,
It
but we want to be
can be.
careful, and ideally we want to work with like a positive or force-free trainer to guide us and make sure that we're not accidentally making things worse for our dog.
Yeah. I have over time in the last 2 years built into my puppy class counter conditioning training actually.
Mm,
I'm like, I don't care if your dog is categorically labeled as reactive or not. Every dog can benefit from counter conditioning training. So yeah, I start talking about it in the classes. I dedicate time to tell them how to do it safely. And it's just a very top line level of counter conditioning training, but I just want to plant the seed in my client's head. Like, this is how you help your dogs feel safe around things that they might otherwise not feel safe around.
mhm,
And the difference between overexposure slash flooding versus safely desensitizing,
mhm,
and what to do to help your dog socialize and what not to do and how to pair and like all these things. And I just want to plant the seed. I don't know if I'm able to cover everything in a 1 hour session with like 2 50-minute break, but I
mhm,
think it's important for them to just at least, oh, there is a difference. I can't just throw
mhm.
them into a park.
And part of that is having an understanding of body language. Like if more people understood what a dog even looks like when they're overwhelmed or feeling scared, because a lot of people don't have that knowledge, and
Yes.
then they're accidentally creating a dog who's maybe becomes reactive later on or is fearful.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I do also be like, if you don't do this, your dog will become reactive. And everyone's like,
No.
but it's so easy for a puppy to become big
Yeah.
feelings. Even if you have good intentions, it's very easy for them to become traumatized.
Yeah.
That's
So I think the moral of the story is that yes, introducing other dogs into the picture can be helpful, but only if it's well orchestrated and that we're watching to make sure our dog is having a positive
yeah.
experience. Yeah.
I work very closely with a dog walker in town. Her name is Kirsten of Wild Sage Pet Care, and she took a lot of education. She watched my classes, and I'm mentoring her. She's an excellent dog walker. She takes on all my reactive dog clients because she's the only walker I trust, and she understands the training. And what she's done is amazing. She walks each dog individually, builds rapport with them, understands their threshold, helps them gain confidence, make good choices. And then now she's been able to pair reactive dogs together. And so she's forming safe, small circle of trust among these dogs, and they're building friendships for the first time with each other. And it's done so safely, and she understands how to pair them safely. She asks good questions, and it's so rewarding to see my clients' dogs in her Instagram, like just play for the first time with each other. And like that's how you want to do it. That's how you want to safely socialize dogs with each other, especially if they have big feelings. There's a way to do it safely, way to make things worse.
It must feel so amazing for their families too to see their dog
Yeah.
playing with another dog.
Yeah.
I think it's like it's such a tricky thing because I wish we had more walkers like that and more people doing group training opportunities because I think a lot of dogs are completely cut off from accessing other dogs from a very early age if they start to show signs of reactivity.
Yeah.
And that's not fair either. Like it's totally fine if your dog goes their whole life without interacting with other dogs if they don't enjoy it or they're scared of it. But we also don't want to say, okay, you're reactive at age 1. And so now the rest of your life, we're never going to expose you to another dog. That's not fair either.
Yeah, a lot of dogs that have reactivity behaviors are actually just based in frustration. They want the access, they don't know how to approach another dog in a very appropriate way. And so finally giving them access, oh, it's the best. I
It's
love it.
really good. And even for a scared dog, they still deserve to have
Yeah.
that experience if it's
Yes.
something that they can handle with like, time and
Yeah.
training.
And
Yeah.
they get to see the same dog friends and, like it's not random dogs. It's
Mm,
just great.
yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about group training for reactive dogs?
I think, I think I I think there's a lot of benefit to offering these group classes and for every dog client to sign up. I think it's more important than what we would call the obedience classes or manners classes. Like, I really want to scream. Your dogs don't need to learn, shake a paw, sit down, go to bed.
Mm,
Your dogs need to feel safe in this world. Your dogs need to know how to make good choices, how to coexist with other triggers and distractions, whether they're excitement based, frustration, or fear. It's more important that they learn these life skills. These are the essential life skills that you can gain from doing parallel walk classes, group classes that are centered around reactivity. Every single individual dog can benefit, which is why I kind of don't necessarily enjoy the manners classes, but it's most people want to sign their dogs up for it because that's what they know. But I really want to maybe do a better job with advertising um, the reactivity classes. I guess if people see that, oh, I have to work with you privately first,
mm-hmm,
never mind.
mm-hmm,
Uh, but that's what I really enjoy. And I hope people see that this is what your dog truly needs, not to learn how to sit when another dog passes.
mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a great place to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining this episode with me.
Thanks, Tess.
For more information on where to find Sandy and her offerings, I will include everything in our show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tess. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Reactive Dog Pod. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review so more reactive dog guardians can find me. If you need help with your reactive dog, I offer one-on-one support, group training, and an online membership, all available virtually worldwide. Information on where to find me is in the show notes for each episode. Thanks again, and happy training.